Getting better. 1,000,000%. I 1,000,000% believe that the Dayton Flyers are afraid of the Wright State Raiders. That's why they come up with every excuse in the book not to play them. There it is. The hottest take of them all. It's the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers, live on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, everybody, we welcome you in live here on a Tuesday. I'm Justin Kinner, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Again, happy Tuesday. A lot to get into. Yes, more fallout from the Joe Burrow injury that, of course, will keep the Bengals without their starting quarterback for, at the very least, 3 months. I let my opinion be known yesterday. I don't think we see Joe Burrow again the rest of this season. I don't understand why we would. Everyone out there could say, well, if the Bengals could just hang around, there's a chance he could come back. And I threw this question out yesterday, and we're going to talk about it with Jason Fitz coming up here around the corner with Yahoo Sports. Kev's going to pop in with us shortly as well, and we'll both have Fitzy on. But my thing is, Joe Burrow last year threw for nearly 5,000 yards, 45 touchdowns, completed almost 70% of his passes. He literally did it all last year. They won 9 games above 500, but they still missed the playoffs. And every issue that this Bengals team had a year ago still exists. Every strength that this team had a year ago still exists, minus, one important factor being the quarterback. If Joe Burrow couldn't make the playoffs with no run game, no defense, and no offensive line, I don't know, man. I'm not comfortable saying that Jake Browning could do it. Now, with that being said, who is Jake Browning? We all know who Jake Browning is. He obviously has bailed the Bengals out of a few tough situations in recent years when they've been without Joe Burrow. Jake Browning 2 years ago, Joe Burrow goes out in week 11. Jake Browning comes in, and take a look here again. Jake Browning in 7 career starts. He has a 4-3 record. He averages 266 yards, almost 267 yards a game. And he has a touchdown interception ratio of 11-7. So, I mean, as we sit here right now, or not really a ratio, but he's thrown 11 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions. The bottom line is what stands out to me, and it's a very basic number. I get it, but the 266 yards per game, that's a very simple, basic number and stat to go off of. But what I like about that is that the offensive flow doesn't stop. The flow of the game doesn't stop. The reason I find this transition from Joe Burrow to Jake Browning so interesting is because of the fact that, okay, Jake Browning is actually the perfect backup quarterback for Joe Burrow because you don't really have to change it up too much for who's replacing him. Jamar Chase is still the number one focus. Like this could be a strength, but it's also a weakness. This is why the run game has to be such a factor for this team moving forward, and I don't think that it can be. A lot of you are big Chase Brown fans. I'm not. I don't think this team stinks at running the football. They've stunk at running the football for years, and a lot of you have continued to say, well, it's not that they stink at the run game. They just don't prioritize it. So of course they're going to be ranked at the bottom every year. Stop. If this team had a balanced run game to balance out the offense with Jake Browning, which is something they technically did have 2 years ago, you had Joe Mixon, you had a good run game, a solid run game a couple years ago to balance it out. My fear for Jake Browning now in 2025 is, yes, you have T, yes, you have Jamar, but you don't have a run game. You guys may like Chase Brown, and I said this yesterday, kind of rubbed some of you the wrong way. I don't care. I've never seen a fan base brag more about a running back in a run game that has consistently ranked at the bottom as much as the Bengals have. Chase Brown will give you an exciting play here or there, but he is not a constant, reliable force in the run game. And I would feel better about Jake Browning replacing Joe Burrow if they had a run game to balance this out with. Everyone right away went into panic mode yesterday. What quarterbacks could the Bengals look at? And by the way, Joe Burrow officially on the IR. They made that announcement today. No surprise there. Out at least 3 months, as we know. But as we sit here right now, I look at this situation that the Bengals are in, and everyone right away, man, what quarterback can they get? And I kind of fell for it too. I was throwing out, look, I think that the Bengals, I think a more exciting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bengals would be a Jameis Winston. I've seen Jameis Winston put up stupid numbers with way less talented wide receivers than what the Bengals have. Can you imagine? I think the guy could throw for close to 5,000 yards. Little exaggeration, but not really. But I think that was the wrong approach yesterday. The Bengals need to sit back and try to decide, okay, what are we trying to accomplish this season now that Joe Burrow's out? Because there's a lot of different directions that this franchise can go in. There's the one option that I think you guys aren't going to like, and I think it's the best one. Caleb Downs. The best way to get Caleb Downs or the top offensive lineman in the draft or whatever, you need to be sitting at the top as best you can. I get that you as a fan base want this team to compete for the playoffs, but let me ask you, as silly as this sounds, and it's a weird question, making the playoffs does what for you? Making the playoffs does what for this organization? It almost hurts this organization. It's a wasted season. Joe Burrow is out. Even if you make the playoffs, you're not winning in the playoffs, and you sure as hell aren't going to win a Super Bowl. Okay, even with all these deficiencies, if Joe Burrow leads you to the playoffs, the likelihood of a playoff run is still slim, but it's significantly higher with Joe Burrow at quarterback than Jake Browning. Fighting and clawing and scratching like crazy to make the playoffs with Jake Browning just seems counterproductive. When you look at how many holes this defense has, all right. And Trey Hendrickson, and by the way, you have Trey Hendrickson and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart's hurt. We don't know how long he's going to be out. Let me ask you, Trey Hendrickson is out. How many pieces on this defense would you deem irreplaceable? I would say Shamar Stewart just because he's your star that you just drafted. In all seriousness, is there anyone on this defense that's considered unmovable? They shouldn't be. This team stinks on defense, at least, right? So you have so many holes to fill. Fighting and clawing to win 8, 9, 10, if you're lucky, games to make the playoffs and be ousted of the playoffs early accomplishes what? You're running in place. It's almost working against you. You have to position yourself as best you can in the draft to be able to go get star players. Now, again, my counterpoint, if I'm listening to me and I'm like, Kinner, that's idiotic. It doesn't matter where they pick in the draft. They're not good at developing talent and drafting talent, this, that, and the other. I get that. I have to believe that Al Golden is going to be a difference maker. I don't think that he is going to be, but I have to believe it because they just signed him, and that's the guy that they felt most comfortable with. I think winning and trying to win without Joe Burrow just seems counterproductive. I don't really know what you accomplish. I think that the direction that the Bengals should go in, as good as Jake Browning is, look at these numbers. He's a 4-3 starter. And by the way, though, that counts him as a starter. That does not include the win from last weekend. He won them that game. Jake Browning was trailing 14-7. Jake Browning threw 3 interceptions and somehow, some way still won that dang football game. So Jake Browning is good enough to go win you some football games. Is he good enough to win you a lot? I don't know. But this idea that we're going to go out there, we being the Bengals, are going to go out there and try to put this team in position to make the playoffs. The question I ask is, but why? As silly as that sounds, it's counterproductive. You're going to work like crazy to win 9 games, to pick anywhere between 17th and 20th in the draft after all the elite defensive players and offensive linemen have been picked through already. I just don't see it. I don't see why that makes sense for this team. And what I think makes sense for this team, Jake Browning's your quarterback. You can't run the football. You can't protect the quarterback. Your defense stinks. You have a lot of holes to fill on that defense. You brought Trey Hendrickson back to go all in one more time with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. That's no longer going to happen. If I'm the Bengals, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, and maybe I need to pay attention to what the clauses are in this contract, but I would dangle Trey Hendrickson out there yesterday. I would dangle Trey Hendrickson out there. You re-sign Trey Hendrickson just because the pressure that your quarterback put on you. Your quarterback, like 50% of the time he's been in Cincinnati, is not available for you. So at this point, you need to move on from Trey Hendrickson. I would not move him. When I said move him yesterday, I would have made up my mind to move him yesterday. I sit back and wait. I keep an eye on the playoff picture. Which team is going to be the most desperate to make a big splash move to get an elite pass rusher like Trey Hendrickson and go from there. But this is all about resetting. You can't protect the quarterback. You can't run the football, and your defense stinks. To me, it seems counterproductive to try to go win football games without the guy that's actually going to lead you to the Super Bowl if you're fortunate enough to even get to the playoffs. I don't know. I like Jake Browning, but and I would feel differently too if this team had a run game that they could like lean on. If they could just say, okay, we're a big explosive offense that feeds Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but we got to go away from that and lean into the run game. I would feel better about the Bengals' chances because if you could lean into the run game, and I think it was Troy. Troy, I hope you're doing well. Thank you for tuning in. Troy on the Justin Kinner Show Facebook page. He messaged in the show and brings up a good point. He goes, the running game would also help the defense stay off the field. If the Bengals had an elite run game, I think that they could, I honestly believe that they would be able to lean into that, less explosive plays through the air, lean into the run game, eat clock throughout the game, and then, of course, keep that defense off the field. And now you're in position to go take control of games and possibly win those. But they can't do that. You can't run the football. They're not going to be able to control the clock. If you have to drop back and pass and try to carry on as is, you're not going to be able to protect Jake Browning. And then what? Sean Clifford? Mike White? I mean, what do we got here? To me, the Bengals just give up. As silly as that sounds, trying to win is pointless. You can't run, you can't defend, you can't block. I don't understand the purpose of trying to go out there and win football games. Damon Hahn, hope you're doing well. Damon Hahn says, my only argument is that you play to win games. I understand the need to rebuild, but I hate not going all out to win. Going all out to win what, though, Damon? Realistically, and I see your point, because that's why I kept saying, I know this sounds weird. The reason I said I know it sounds weird is because we are taught that you play to win the game. Hello, right? Like, we've all heard that quote, that clip before. But, and again, this goes back to my original point for years and years now. I hate that in sports we incentivize losing. If we did not incentivize losing with giving the worst teams the best players, I would be having a completely different tune. I would be with you, Damon. Telling a team to lose on purpose is kind of stupid. But the Bengals, who have so many deficiencies, they don't, outside of Shamar Stewart, there is not one player on that defense that you can confidently tell me, oh no, the Bengals, they can't move on from him. As far as I'm concerned, the Bengals head into next season with only one defensive player on the roster. You know what I mean. I know there'll be more. My point is, there's only one player I deem immovable on that Bengals defense, and Shamar Stewart, because I think he has promise. But the rest, that's how many holes you have to fill in that defense. And trying to win 8, 9, 10 games just to pick in the middle of the draft. And again, if you needed a quarterback, it's different. But you need offensive linemen. Those are going to be taken high. Defensive players will be taken high. You have no chance for Caleb Downs. And I think it's silly to miss out on a generational talent like Caleb Downs because you wanted to win 8, 9 games. I get what you're saying, Damon. I'm not even saying you're wrong. I'm probably wrong in this one. I just feel it's counterproductive to go out there and try to muster up a season that you're without Joe Burrow. Now, I will say this. If this was week 12 and the Bengals had won 8, 9 games already and you still had a month to go and you wanted to try to go win 2 more to get into the playoffs, I'm all for it. But it's week 3 now. We're heading into week 3. It's officially week 3. And you're realistically, let me put it this way. If we were coming into the season, if Joe Burrow didn't exist and this roster is the same exact roster and Jake Browning is your guy, are we really talking about playoffs and big picture? No, we're talking about what do the Bengals need to do to position themselves to draft a quarterback. I like Jake Browning, but his role is to be a backup. It's as simple as that. And to be a backup means to come in situational plays and quarters and games throughout the season, not play the season. And that's what they're doing with Jake Browning right now. We'll see what ultimately happens, by the way. But I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports, he'll hang out with us coming up here shortly. Like I said, I'm conflicted on the Bengals. If this was a midseason injury, a later in the season injury, I'm all for continuing the fight. I just feel like you need I think the football gods are telling you something. Continuing to run this same bad roster out every year, even though it does include Burrow, Jamar, and T, it's not working. It's not working. You can't protect the quarterback. You can't run the football, and you can't stop the run or stop the pass. This is a bad team. And trying to win 8, 9 games to worsen your draft stock, to miss out on Caleb Downs and some others when you can you imagine, like, let's say Shamar Stewart does, he's built like Myles Garrett. Imagine if he turns in just half of what Myles Garrett is, and then you have a Caleb Downs kind of, being the leader out on the, on the field defensively. The future's now as bright on the defensive side of the ball as what it is on the offensive side of the ball. But to give that up because you want to try and be eliminated in the wild card round of the playoffs versus just already settling for a top draft pick. This team needs draft picks, and that's why you need to move on from Trey Hendrickson as well. Nonetheless. All right, good stuff. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Let's step away for a few moments. We'll talk about this Joe situation. Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, when we come back. All right, everybody, we welcome you back. I'm Justin Kinner, Kev Nash, back with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. Of course, we officially wrapped up week 2 of the NFL season last night, but all everyone around here wants to continue to talk about is the direction of the Cincinnati Bengals, who, of course, has been a very weird start to the season. You finally you haven't got off to a hot start because you still look sloppy, but the most important thing is you're 2-0. But you've had the biggest loss of the season because you pretty much lost your quarterback for the majority, if not the entire season. And to join us more to talk more about that, of course, none other than Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, good morning. How are we?
I'm better than Bengals fans. And look, it breaks my heart. I just being honest, the hardest part about this is I'm sitting here wearing a Raiders shirt as we talk right now. I don't think we all realize how powerful having a franchise quarterback can be until suddenly you wake up with one. And then you don't realize the mismanagement of it until you get to this situation. And I know I saw Zach Taylor say we're going to continue to be aggressive, all those things. Okay, fine. But you had, as long as we've been doing these hits together, we've talked about the fact that they leave Burrow back there to get murdered over and over and over again. And so at some point, I hear the argument of is Joe Burrow injury prone? Well, okay, I might be injury prone too if every time I walked out in the street, somebody just slapped me with a baseball bat. I just feel like at some point you've got to protect your quarterback. And even just the concept, look, I hope Browning comes out and just absolutely kicks butt. I hope that happens. But if you're worried about your backup quarterback situation, shame on you. You had to know. If you're a Bengals fan, if you're a Bengals organization, you had to know 50 different players started in the NFL last year at the quarterback position. You had to know with an injury-prone quarterback that there would be likely a time that you needed your backup. So you already made the decision it's Browning. So I'm not going to panic now about Browning. I'm just looking at this thing. When does this cycle stop? And the cycle doesn't stop until they better protect him, until they hire new people to come in and analyze who the best offensive linemen are. Because the Bengals have tried and failed. So if you can't identify an offensive line, if you can't coach an offensive line, if you can't protect your quarterback, I don't care if you use a third party, bring in a consulting firm. I don't care. Find somebody you can bring in the room that can actually figure out how to protect your quarterback.
This obviously it's not a good thing to lose Burrow, but look, this is the third time that, and we don't know that it sounds like he could potentially come back, obviously 3 months from now, mid-December. If they're out of it, it's do you even risk bringing him back for those final games anyways, with the way things are, especially if this O-line gets any worse moving forward. But I guess the question I have for you about this Bengals team is it's not a good thing what happened, but could this be okay, this is the turning point. Now we got to change our whole direction as far as how we put this roster together. It shouldn't have come to this to begin with, but could this be a silver lining that, okay, it finally gets that front office's attention?
I mean, maybe the silver lining is much like when he missed a season and all of a sudden Jamar ends up a Bengal. Maybe the silver lining is you're going to be in such a good draft position, you'll have your choice of the first offensive lineman. But then, I guess my counter to that is who's picking that offensive lineman. So, yeah, could it be a wake-up call for the organization? Sure. But shame on you for getting to this point and needing a wake-up call. Kenner, how just absolutely devastating is it for everybody, the 53 that are on that roster, season ticket holders, the ushers that work in the stadiums, concession salespeople, the trickle down economics impact of not protecting your quarterback is substantial. So yeah, is it a wake up call? I mean, it should be, but how many other wake up calls should there have been? I feel like at this point, it's lost. And the problem is when you have a franchise saver at the quarterback, you cannot rely on him to always be a franchise saver. We've seen that year in, year out with the Bengals. I think we're seeing a little of that right now with the Chiefs. So how much you putting on these guys to make him Superman? And I'm tired of watching the Superman movie where he gets his butt kicked the whole time and then miraculously tries to win at the end. It's not supposed to work that way. It's supposed to work the way it does for the Ravens and the Bills, who you feel like every year have a shot at a championship.
Let's talk about blame pie with this, because I hear so much about oh man, it's the offensive line's fault, it's the organization's fault. I'm from the standpoint of absolutely it's their fault, but also I believe that Joe Burrow plays a role in this as well from style of play. Big Ben got banged for this during his heyday. He was always hurt because he would hang onto the ball. He would do these crazy things in the pocket, wait to get dragged down. I view Joe Burrow the very similar situation where he waits to the last second because he's looking for the home run pass. Some of the blame goes on to coach Zach Taylor because of the plays that he's dialing up. So where do you go down with the whole blame pie situation?
I think that there's some blame pie to go to Burrow on this for holding the ball the way you said. Just like last night, I think when we were all watching Monday Night Football, and for anyone that saw Baker Mayfield, particularly in the fourth quarter, all my friends were like, "Oh my God, that's quarterback I want out there, like just risking everything for a first down." And I'm thinking, hell no. Like, at what point do we just realize that the one position that will absolutely destroy your season is losing your starting quarterback? I no longer want to live in a world where we see quarterbacks strive for an extra yard. I want to see quarterbacks do what Justin Herbert did. Like the number of times Justin Herbert was running the football last night and just gave himself up 4 yards early. Why? Because Justin Herbert doesn't want to get hit by Max Crosby. I don't blame him. Like the Chargers season will be nothing without Justin Herbert. I think more quarterbacks need to learn from that mindset. Like we need to stop as a society even pushing this like, oh, toughness at the quarterback position. I don't need toughness at the quarterback position. I need availability at the quarterback position. And without availability, you got nothing. So, what would we rather see? A tough Joe Burrow hang in there to take that extra second, or Joe Burrow just fling the ball out of bounds and not take the hit at all? I think we all know the answer to that today.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. With the blame pie thing. First of all, Joe Burrow's it's not his fault he got hurt, but the direction I went into on yesterday's show was that first of all, I feel horrible that he's hurt. Now that I need to put that disclaimer out there, but just to put it out there. But where I'm going with this is I don't feel bad for Joe Burrow with his offensive line and with the defensive issues and the run game issues, because my big thing that I got a lot of heat for last year at the Super Bowl or during the Super Bowl was when he did his media tour. And I said, he's asking for all of the wrong things. He's demanding that you have 2 number 1 wide receivers, demanding, to get a Mike Gesicki and others. And I'm just like, but like, you didn't miss the playoffs because, of that, like Noah Fant. They had Noah Fant. You didn't miss the playoffs last year because you didn't have Noah Fant. You missed the playoffs because you had Noah defense. Like, so I sit here and I'm like, at the end of the day, Joe Burrow, you have the power. Everything he asked for, he got. Everything he asked for. He knows he's getting hit hard. Why is he not using that power for good to get that offensive line buttoned up? The team listens, and he just, I feel like, is asking for the wrong things. And maybe he's not. Maybe the front office needs to say, hey, I know what you're asking for and want, but we got to make the decisions for our team, not you. That's why I have a hard time sitting here saying, hey, Burrow, I know you're getting hit a lot. I know your defense stinks, but I don't feel bad for you because you're not ever emphasizing those points of the issues when you have a chance with that mic in front of you.
I'm going to steal this point from you because it's an important one. As you were talking, I keep thinking about, okay, I think we could all say without hesitation the top 3 quarterbacks in the AFC right now, in no particular order, are Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson, right? When have you ever heard any of the 3 of them? Now, Patrick Mahomes was deserted at the playmaker position. When have we ever heard him go to the mic and be like, they got to get me receivers? Josh Allen was deserted at the playmaker position. And even when most of us thought they downgraded at wide receiver, I've interviewed Josh at this point probably a dozen times. Every time I've tried to pin him in on, like, don't you want receiver help? His answer has been, man, I'm just excited about the guys we have. And we're, the way our offense is built, the next man up, we're all going to be just fine. Even the Ravens, like the Ravens went through a period where they needed some wide receiver help. Did we ever hear Lamar just pounding the table? So it is funny to me that the 3 best quarterbacks and at least the 2 most complete teams in the AFC and the Bills and Ravens, I don't remember ever hearing their quarterbacks use that as a moment to say, go out and get me weapons. And, it's interesting because Joe Burrow is Joe Burrow. Like he's the quarterback and he's got friends and he wants to throw the ball and all of these things. But also politely and respectfully, I don't really care. Like I need to build the best 53. And that's the hardest part. I think part of the way we cover the sport creates this, but like we stopped looking at the best 53 in the NFL and we focus so much on the best quarterback. So then it's like, well, we got the quarterback. Now what do we do? Wow. Now, well, okay. You still got to have the best 53 around that quarterback if you want to have any shot at beating. Like that, if I continue to die on the hill this year, that games are decided in the margins between like teams. So if I think if you ask yourself the question of can the 53, like all 53 of the Bengals compare to all 53 of the Ravens, all 53 of the Bills, your answer of where your team actually lies gets a lot simpler. Instead of looking for every quarterback to be a cheat code that solves everything, like if you want to make great cupcakes, you got to have great frosting and great cake, right? Like they don't have all of that. So as much as Bengals fans are sitting here lamenting what their season looks like without Joe Burrow, I think what you really got to do is organizationally ask yourself, if you were going into a kitchen filled with the ingredients of the Bills, the ingredients of the Ravens, even the ingredients of the Chiefs versus the ingredients of the Bengals, who you got? I think the answer to that is pretty clear.
Switching over to the Cleveland Browns, they lose to the Ravens 41-17. Where do the Browns go from here?
Down. The Ravens are just so. The Ravens are great, and the Ravens came into that game angry, so I don't take a lot from that. But this is sort of what you had to know you were signing up for. And I hear Myles Garrett come out and say, this is disgusting. It's got to be better. All these things. I hear that. I understand that. I just don't think you can manufacture a better situation. Like there is right now, have we seen a single quarterback play a snap of football that was available to the Cleveland Browns this offseason that we believe would have changed the Browns drastically? Have we seen any available quarterback? Because certainly we've seen Sam Darnold not look all that great, right? Like Sam Darnold does not look like a world beater. Daniel Jones is the only exception. And I do believe that Daniel Jones, I actually on Yahoo Sports Daily, I predicted before the season started that Daniel Jones would be comeback player of the year and the Colts would win the division. That's because he's a perfect fit for Shane Steichen's offense. Steichen likes that mobile quarterback that's sort of like going to give me the wish version of Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts. And he's got that in Daniel Jones. I think that's a perfect marriage. So I'll acquiesce to Daniel Jones, but I don't think Daniel Jones is system proof. I think Daniel Jones is in a perfect system. All the rest of them, like, do we really believe that the Browns would be winning more games with Geno right now? I don't know. After the 3 interception game we saw last night, I think Geno's better than Joe. But are any of these long-term answers where you're like, we solved the quarterbacks? Like the problem is you wake up one day and you don't have a quarterback on a roster that's pretty good, but you need some help, and you don't have the quarterback, and everybody says, well, go get one. Oh, okay. Who do you want me? Yeah, and I think it's the where. Like when you specifically drill people down and say, okay, what transaction should have been made that would have made the Browns a playoff team this year? I don't think there's an answer to that. Once you accept that, then you're like, okay, I get it. We're not going to be a very good football team most weeks.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, with that last thing on the Browns on the way, because I know that they're not good right now, obviously. But what's the purpose of throwing out Joe Flacco every week? Like you have 2 rookies. That was the big drama, was the fact that they took 2 rookies in the draft. And I get going with Flacco, as we talked last week, that if they feel like they have a playoff caliber team or a competitive team, I get why you go with Joe Flacco, but they're not going anywhere with Joe Flacco at this point. I mean, what's the point of continuing to throw him out there? At some point, you need to know what you have with, of course, Dylan Gabriel, with Shedeur Sanders. I would rather, if I'm going to watch my team lose all season, I'd rather watch them lose while trying to figure out what they have with the quarterbacks than to find them get hot in the final 5 weeks, go 3-2 and think you have something, pass on a quarterback in next year's draft, and then be in the same situation you are a year from now.
I respect that concept so much because I think you're right on paper. My counter to it is, what if when you see them in practice every day, it's abundantly clear that neither of them is ready? Like that's the part of the equation we never factor in. Like, what if every single day when you see Dylan Gabriel in practice, you're like, yep, not playing him. He ain't ready. And then you got to go to Myles Garrett and be like, hey, we both know he's not ready. We both saw practice this week. It sucked. Like, we're not even letting Shedeur, according to some reports, not even letting Shedeur run the scout team. I don't know if that's true or not, but like you see these things on the internet, right? If all of that is true, like I'm just going to presume that the coaches are doing the best they can to win, which means they're seeing something in practice that tells them that guy's not good enough.
So obviously the Browns are probably going to be looking for a quarterback, but looking at the college ranks, I mean, the guys that they had out there, from Arch to Gus Nussmeier to Kay Kupnick to Norris Sellers, maybe it's Carson Beck. Who is that quarterback in college football that people should be, quote unquote, tanking for?
He's not there. And that's the danger right now for everybody that's like, oh, we're going to tank and get a quarterback next year. All right. Are you? Garrett Nussmeier's played pretty well. I think Garrett Nussmeier's played pretty well. Kay Klubnik is not. Arch Manning has been a disaster. Like, if Arch comes out after this year, I'd be stunned. There's no way. He needs 2 years of college football, and he still might not be good. We don't know. Like, I mean, Arch has been flat out bad. So who's going to go on a run? Does anyone really believe that Drew Aller is a franchise saver? Like, I don't. I don't look at Drew Aller and think, you know what? I hope my team sucks so much that we can get Drew Aller as our quarterback. Like that's the hardest part, is that we presumed as a collective that this year's quarterback class would be really good. And now we're finding out quickly that this year's quarterback class isn't really good. So every time we get into draft prep and somebody says, well, skip it this year because next year looks better, understand that we might just all be wrong about that. Like, and none of us thought that Joe Burrow was going to be Joe Burrow going into his senior year. None of us thought that Jaden Daniels was going to be Jaden Daniels going into his last year, right? Like, so I do think that there's some element of it's just an unknown every year. And right now, the biggest unknown in college football is what quarterback do. Like, you need one win. You got to go right now. I'll give every Ohio State fan in the country that's listening to this game, to this show, I'll give every one of them the opportunity to go out and say, you know what? I need one win for one game. This is the quarterback I want. For the last several years, we've had a pretty good idea who the answer to that is. As we stand right now, why not Julian Saint? Hell, just as likely to be saying as it is anybody else. Like I think it's absolutely wild how bad the quarterbacks have looked in college football this year.
Speaking of that, doesn't it just basically make it wide open for the best talented teams like Ohio State and Georgia, since there isn't a dominant quarterback out there?
100%. 100% it does. And Carson Beck, I should give Carson a little bit more respect. I've seen the worst of Carson Beck. We all have, and I'm just not sure that goes away. But you're right. I think the way the system's currently built, the best teams have a chance. Like, I think it's kind of exciting right now. Like, you could, if you are a fan, if you take the fan hat and you put it on, and like if you were at a party tonight and they say we just had hats laid out, like recruiting hats, and you had to put on the hat and make a compelling case to the room for why that team could win a national championship, there's a lot of hats that you'd be just fine with, right? Like that, I think, is great for college football. Like when we're talking about the college football playoff, I mean, right now as we sit, I think there's a far better chance we get a better 12, a much better 12 than anybody anticipated coming into this season, because it looks like it's tougher to figure out exactly who it is. That being said, I'm not sleeping on Oregon. Everybody's given up on Oregon because they lost last year when they were so dang good. I don't know. I mean, we don't know if they have the quarterback answer right now, but we certainly know that Oregon is really good.
I'll be the first one to say, like, when we're doing our season predictions, stuff like that, Oregon just like wasn't top of mind. Like I never thought of them, but like just watching them put up 60s and 70s, and I'm like, oh yeah, forgot Oregon does that all the time. So yes, they are a player for sure.
Jason, last thing, on the way up before we let you go, appreciate your time as always. It's kind of, it's in the middle of the day. I have not had an alcoholic beverage. I never thought I would say this. I'm excited for Indiana, Illinois. How about that matchup out of the Big Ten? Illinois, Indiana, top 25 showdown, two of the Big Ten's finest.
I mean, look, Bielema having Illinois ranked where they are is like, there hasn't been a big statement win that makes everybody say, oh yeah, that's why. Like I'm just curious, right? Like this is the ultimate prove it we actually belong game. And I think it's sexy as hell because of that. Now, you're right. Like Indiana, somebody that it was an easy thing to say this year. Well, this isn't last year's Indiana. Last year was a fluke. They get a big win here, and all of a sudden we have to talk about tiers, right? Like, and so look at what Wisconsin did over the weekend. They got thumped, and they reminded all of us that Wisconsin is no longer on the tier of a competent Big Ten college football program. They're on the tier of a team that's going to be bowl eligible more often than not, and every once in a while surprise somebody. That's a much different tier. Like Michigan State used to compete for, some concept of championships. Michigan State now is going to be a bowl team, and every once in a while they'll make a fan base angry and they'll get a big upset. Like, which tier is Indiana and Illinois going to find themselves in? They're certainly not in the same tier today as, Penn State, Ohio State. But are they in the same tier as where Michigan is? Yeah. So is that sustainable? That becomes really interesting to me. I mean, Bryce Underwood obviously could change everything for Michigan, and Illinois doesn't have a Bryce Underwood. But, man, I don't know. I kind of love this game for just the fact that we will find out something about which one of these two teams belongs in that tier of Big Ten teams that deserve to be talked about the same way we talk about that tier of SEC schools.
Night game, too.
Oh, yeah.
Give it to me.
All right, good stuff. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports. Jason, you the man. Go get that internet figured out.
We'll try. I appreciate you, boys. Thank you.
Take care. All right, more of the Justin Kinner Show. Kev Nash hanging out with us. We'll be right back. The Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits.
back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
All right, everybody, we welcome you back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here, Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. Ron Howard brings up, shout out to Ron. Thank you for listening, Ron. Ron Howard brings up the fact that there are multiple starting quarterbacks out early in the season. J.J. McCarthy, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels. I feel like I'm missing another obvious one in there. This morning I was listening to ESPN Radio. They're talking about the fact that, if you're a quarterback, that your name starts with the letter J, probably not a good thing right now. But it was J.J. McCarthy, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, and who am I missing? Help me out, Ron. Who's the other quarterback that's hurt right now? I'm probably missing an obvious one, but nonetheless. As we sit here right now, obviously all the talk has been about Joe Burrow. Brock Purdy's one too, but that's not a J, Ron. But yes, I mean, the list is it's quite a long list of quarterbacks already hurt as we sit here heading into week 3. And like I said, we opened up the show and, so much is made about Burrow. I spent a lot of time on the Burrow side yesterday. I'm not really worried about the Burrow thing anymore because Justin Fields. Thank you, William. I appreciate you coming in the clutch right there. So, yeah, J.J. McCarthy, Joe Burrow, Jaden Daniels, and Justin Fields. Brock Purdy in that list as well. So just a lot of quarterbacks banged up early on. It's looked like September football. It's been pretty ugly. But we can sit here and talk about Joe Burrow and the future of the Bengals with Joe Burrow. But the bottom line is the one thing that we do know is that the Bengals and Joe Burrow will not be a tandem for at least the next 3 months. So the only thing we can talk about is, well, what do the Bengals look like for the next 3 months? Well, what we do know is that for the next 3 months, the Bengals are going to have this guy running their offense. Yesterday, right off the bat, we started going into the scenarios of, well, who could the Bengals start to target to go improve the QB room? My thing is this: you're not going to get much better than Jake Browning. And if they continue to run the offense the way that they do, as if Joe Burrow's back there, they're going to lose a lot of games. I know they were able to come back and beat Jacksonville. That's fine. That's not going to happen often. I mean, you won a game throwing 3 interceptions. You're not going to win. Try throwing 3 picks in another game and see if you win. You're not going to win. That's not me hating. It's just the reality of it. I think we can admit that the Bengals are the worst team in football right now. I think you look at both their wins, and they just did some things in there that, I mean, they didn't. The Browns dominated them in week 1, and the Bengals won. Your quarterback gets hurt. Your franchise quarterback gets hurt early in that game. Your backup comes in, throws 3 interceptions while trailing, and somehow you still win while your defense stinks. I mean, my goodness. And that's not me like watering this down and trying to take anything away from them. Guys, like the way that they've won these games, it's completely different than last year where they were right there. They were just finding ways to lose games. They're finding ways to win it. Can they find ways to continue winning moving forward? Possibly. I'm not going to bet money on that. I'm not going to go that route. Jake Browning, 4-3, averaging 266 yards a game, 11 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. Okay, that 4-3 record does not include the win from this past weekend because he technically didn't start, but my goodness, what a performance from Browning, good and bad. I said yesterday the mistake that they made was that we as fans made was going right into what quarterback can they go get. It shouldn't have been about what quarterback that they should go get. It needs to be what can they do to improve this run game. If they have any chance at all at winning football games moving forward, it's going to come down to the run game. All right? Like, it's as simple as that. If they can't run the football, they're not going to win anything, and they need to run the football. They need to lean into the run more than to lean into the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. I think the fact that they have become so infatuated with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, it's what's got them in this problem to begin with. The front office and Joe Burrow so obsessed with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that they haven't allocated enough money into that offensive line. They haven't prioritized the running backs. Their defense is just atrocious. They are so obsessed with those 2 wide receivers that it has been at the detriment of the makeup of the rest of the roster. That needs to stop, and it needs to stop now. You look at the Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, and it's tough to be the Philadelphia Eagles, but they also have a quarterback that has no ego, unlike the Bengals. They also are a well-run organization, unlike the Bengals. They have, obviously, 2 very good wide receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, who would love to be getting the targets and the looks and the numbers that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins get, but because they sacrifice their individual stats and their role in the team for the sake of the team, That's why they're Super Bowl champions. That's why they're the best team in football, because they have a quarterback that many people say, well, okay, they have a quarterback that's not very good. That's why he, barely throws for over 100 yards, had multiple games last year where he threw for under 200. Guys, we've seen their quarterback and Jalen Hurts go out there and average close to 300 yards a game before while winning football games. Now we've also seen them win the Super Bowl while he barely throws for over 200 yards a game, and they go out and they win a Super Bowl. Like, the bottom line is the reason that the Eagles are so good is because they're balanced and they lean into the run, even at the expense of the pass game. You have Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown, and yet you continue to take opportunities away from them to lean into the run. That's what you got to do. I mean, if you were to say, imagine, could the Bengals beat the Kansas City Chiefs if Joe Burrow just throws for 100 yards? No, there's no way. The Eagles did it because they have a run game. The Bengals are one-dimensional. I think that the one bright spot about this Joe Burrow injury could be a shift in direction of how the Cincinnati Bengals are going to run their offense, build their roster. I hope they learn their lesson. And I don't know how you unlearn it, because financially you've already dove into the deep end, and I don't know how you unravel that. But they have so many holes on defense. They have to lean into the run game. If you lean into the run game, it keeps your horrible defense off the field as well. Being balanced is going to be key moving forward, and this team just has too many holes. But I don't know how you do it. I don't know who's out there and available, for a trade or this, that, the other. I'm not going to pretend to act like I know the running back market right now and see what's out there. But they have to do a full-on shift into leaning into the run game and stop acting like, oh, Joe Burrow's out, but we're just going to continue running the offense like Joe Burrow's out there. That's the problem. I mean, the fact that Jake Browning was even in position to throw 3 interceptions is crazy to me, because I think that you can't run it the same way that you do with Burrow out there. So we'll see what ultimately happens. But for me, the Bengals at this point, I think it's silly. And I said this to open up the show and got a lot of pushback from some Bengals fans. I think it's silly to try to go out there and win football games. You're winning at the detriment of your future, because I don't understand what you're trying to win this year. Well, Kenner, we're trying to win games. All right, you're going to try and go win games. You're going to win 8 and 9, be picking anywhere between 17th to 21st or 22nd in the draft. You desperately need O-line help. All the top O-linemen will be picked in the top 10. All the elite defensive players will be taken in the top 15. You don't need a quarterback. So it's like, even if you try to win and let's say you sneak your way into the playoffs, okay, that's great. Outside of Shamar Stewart, there's not one player on that defensive side of the ball that's worth keeping next year. And I say that knowing that Trey Hendrickson is the best player on the team right now, but we know he's not going to be a part of the Bengals in the future. So I say all of that to say this team has so many holes to fill that trying to compete to be an average team in an early knockout in the playoffs doesn't make any sense. You imagine if you get if Shamar Stewart, who's built like Myles Garrett, if you have Shamar Stewart, and he's a project, and he develops into a dominant pass rusher in the NFL, and then you get a Caleb Downs, this Joe Burrow injury might be there's a silver lining there. Now you have a dominant ball hawk that's leading the back end of your defense, and then you have a dominant pass rusher in Shamar Stewart. That's a great tandem to build around to try to get off the mat. Now you have just as much young talent that's bright for the future on the defensive side of the ball as you do on the offensive side. But I think going out there, like I said, going out there with Jake Browning, what are you actually trying to do? What is it that you are trying to accomplish right now with Joe Burrow out? You were a fringe playoff team to begin with Joe Burrow. Now you're without him. What are you trying to accomplish? I think the Bengals need to dangle Trey Hendrickson out there and see what kind of draft picks they can get, because I think this team has way too many holes to fill to do it on just your normal allotted 7 draft picks. Right? Like, you have 7 draft picks, 1 per round. We all know that the Bengals have struggled in the high rounds, much less, let's count on them making good picks in the back end. So technically, 7 draft picks, you have 3 opportunities technically to get those right. And you still have probably 6, 7 other spots on defense that you have to improve on. Man, way too many holes. You can't run the football. You can't protect the quarterback, and your defense stinks. Joe Burrow's out. You brought Trey Hendrickson back to do one more all-in season. I understood it, but it blew up. It's fine. Accept it. You're lucky that the Joe Burrow injury happened early in the season so that you could at least scan the market, see what you can get for Trey Hendrickson, get some draft picks back. and plan for next draft and plan for next season. You could turn it around quickly if you do it correctly. That's a conversation for later, but you got to start somewhere. All right, let's go to the comment section. Let's see who's in the chat. William Yelly says, no, the Eagles are great because of roster building. There's layers to it, no doubt about it. But I can't sit here and just say, well, the Bengals should just fold as a franchise because they can't draft and they can't develop. And they, when they do get good things, they ruin it, which basically is, I've just said the truth on everything. I'm with you, but they got to start somewhere. We saw when they draft, there was a 2-year stretch where they drafted really well. When you got your Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and your T. Higgins, and your Logan Wilsons, and you got your Evan McPhersons, and you got your dudes in there. The problem is they had back-to-back good drafts, and everything else has been complete failure. So I want to say I'm with you there. David Shaw, I want to argue, but I can't. Brown has 5th most rushing attempts in the NFL, but his yards per rush is almost last. I want them to lean into the run. I just don't know if they can. They can't run the. Oh, Sean. Oh, that I'm with you. I know they can't run the football, but that's the problem. Yesterday when we started talking about, okay, Joe Burrow's out, who should they go get? Who should they go trade for? Jameis Winston. Who's available free agency? I think that was the wrong decision to go. You already have one of the best backups in the NFL. What you need is to now look around the league. Who can we get to help this run game? Should have been a priority in the offseason. It shouldn't have taken the injury for that, but they're probably not going to do that either. So right now, that's really what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. Ron Howard says the Bengals could pick up Flacco after the Browns start Gabriel. Yeah, the Browns aren't going to do anything to help the Bengals. The Browns barely do anything to help themselves. Yelly drafted bum-ass Mims over the defensive rookie of the year, Jared Verse. I did not like the Amarius Mims pickup last year. They've made bad. Look, I'm with you, William. They've made dumb decisions in the draft. They've made so many ones. Eric All was a dumb decision. Amarius Mims was a bad decision. The jury's still out on the Shamar Stewart, although I think there's some promise there. Obviously, Jermaine Burton, don't get me started on that one. This team has swung and missed on pretty much everything over the last couple of years. And if you do that, you better at least match it with some intensity in free agency. They don't do that either. That's been the other problem. David says issue with that is if they trade Hendrickson, they lose all leverage. They won't get any draft picks back in the first 3 rounds. But I don't know if they lose leverage. I mean, that's why it doesn't mean you trade them to second. The trade deadline's a month and some change away still. There's going to be a team when we get to that trade deadline. There's going to be teams who are like, all right, man, we're in good shape. We're a dominant pass rush away from really moving us to that next level. They don't do it now. They do it then. They've already they're not going to get as much for Trey Hendrickson now as what they would have in the offseason. It doesn't matter though. You got to get something. You've got to get something. Keeping Trey Hendrickson post trade deadline for a non-playoff team, knowing you're not going to keep him moving forward, it doesn't make any sense. They have to move on from Trey Hendrickson to try and regain some draft capital to get some of that back. But while I have some of y'all here, please hit the like button. Hit the like button. I see a lot of you on YouTube. I see a handful of you on Facebook. Please give the show a like. That helps with the algorithm as far as that goes. But all right, we're wrapping up the first hour of the show. We'll step away for a few minutes. I want to talk a little college football as well. We'll dive into that. Ohio State had kind of a boring matchup with Ohio over the weekend, but the Bobcats made it interesting. So we'll talk about that when we come back. AP Top 10. That's out as well. All of that when we return to presented by
Justin Kinner Show.
The Wayne Warriors at the Fairmont Firebirds. That is going to be our Week 5 Gridiron High School Football game of the week. Keith Byers and I will be on the call coming up this Friday night. 6:30 pregame coverage begins. 7 o'clock to kick off. How in the heck are we already at the halfway point of the high school football season, or at least at the halfway point of the regular season? But nonetheless, we welcome you back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 407 here in the Miami Valley. I hope everyone has had a great start to the week. I know Bengals fans have not. That's been the majority of the shows the last, yesterday and today. Shout out to Jason Fitz, who gave us time. If you missed that conversation, we'll have that again coming up for you here around the corner. Look, my big hot take for today's show is this, and I don't even think it's a hot take. I think it would be a mistake for the Bengals to sit on Trey Hendrickson for the rest of the season. At this point, you're not really playing for anything. You may be saying, okay, we're trying to still play for the playoffs. Okay, what's this team realistically going to do when you get to the playoffs? And is this team even really good enough to make the playoffs? I mean, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but they can't run the football. They can't protect the quarterback, and their defense is horrible. I'm sorry, even with Joe Burrow, that doesn't sound like a recipe for a playoff team. In fact, we know it's not, because we saw it last year, even with the quarterback throwing for 4,500 yards, completing 70% of his passes, throwing for 45 touchdowns, an MVP level season, the team still missed the playoffs. It's not a hot take. I think right now, when you have a defense as bad as the Cincinnati Bengals have, they have so many holes. They have so many needs, whether it's the offensive line, whether it's defense, whether it's the run game. They have way too many holes to just rely on the 7 draft picks that they have next year. I think that moving on from Trey Hendrickson by the deadline, I don't think you do it now. You sit back, you scour the league, and you wait for, you just got to sit back and wait for someone to jump. Shaw's biggest kickback to this in the chat is he said that they've lost all the leverage. All the other teams know the Bengals are desperate, but for a pick in the 4th or later, I don't see how that helps. I don't think that you understand. The Cleveland Browns had the wide receiver last year that led the NFL in drops and still got a 3rd rounder for him. And it wasn't because Amari Cooper was worth a 3rd rounder to the rest of the league. It's because the Bills were desperate for another wide receiver. They didn't want to give up a 3rd round pick. All right. They didn't want to give up a 3rd round pick for Amari Cooper, but they knew that was their best chance to get the best available wide receiver at that time. It's all about the situation. As of right now, does that situation exist? No. We don't really know what the playoff picture is going to look like, but as you get closer to that deadline, I think it would be foolish of the Cincinnati Bengals to not entertain that and to not aggressively pursue it. This team needs draft picks. The more draft picks that they can get, the better. And to say that they've lost all leverage, I think they don't have as much leverage as they did in the offseason, but at the same time, you got to think, look around the NFL right now, all right, and you look at some of these teams. We're only 2 weeks in, so I'm not going to put a whole lot of stock there, but if you're Buffalo, if you have a chance, and I don't think Cincinnati trades someone to Buffalo, but Buffalo, who, what if they just lean into their strength and say, hey, we're willing to give up a 3rd rounder to get Trey Hendrickson? You would be kind of silly not to, or a 2nd round. And by the way, it's not going to be 1 pick. Trey Hendrickson is he's up there with those upper pass rushers. I don't put him there, but again, the league does. He's that guy that's going to push someone over the edge. He's going to put someone, at that next level. The Indianapolis Colts, what if they bite the bullet? They could sit there and say, hey, we may be giving up a little more than we should to get Trey Hendrickson, but we know how dominant he is in Lou Anarumo's defense. Let's get him here. The Houston Texans, they have a very good defense as it is. They're starting to fall behind. What if they get desperate to move forward? There will be teams. The Chargers, are you kidding me? And then, of course, you look over to the NFC. You think that the Dallas Cowboys, who have a lot, by the way, the Dallas Cowboys have a ton of draft capital right now. To sit there and say, you could say, well, the Dallas Cowboys could just get Trey Hendrickson in the offseason. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are in a position to wait and risk it. If you have a chance right now to get a Trey Hendrickson, if you're a team out there that needs it, you pull the trigger. The Lions could be one of those teams. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers could be one of those teams. Don't count out the Rams. So I completely disagree. People, I think that in the offseason, I think there is more of the markets are pretty tight in the offseason. You don't give up more than this for that type of player in the offseason. But everyone's situation is different. Guys become more desperate at the deadline. And I think that stuff matters at that point. So we'll see what happens. But I just think the Cincinnati Bengals truly need to entertain that when it's all said and done. All right. 937-518-1410. That's the number that you could text or call to jump in the conversation. I want to move over to college football. I want to get into that. We've spent a lot on the NFL right now. And Ron brings up a good point. The Bucs lose Kansas for the season last night. we'll see what, there's going to be. And by the way, that's just where we're at after 2 weeks. I'm not saying the Bengals trade him tomorrow. No, but just sit back and wait, because maybe the Bengals, who are already 2-0, maybe they go on, maybe by the deadline, they're 5-3 and they don't want to. I don't think that they will be. I think that this team's about to tailspin, but that's besides the point. You got to wait and see. The Bengals are going to wait and see to see where they're at the deadline, but they also would be foolish to just sit on him post trade deadline as well. Okay. Sorry, I got distracted. People texting me during the show. My bad. All right. Focus. My ADD is getting the best of me as we sit here right now. All right. So college football, Ohio State over the weekend, they take care of business over the Ohio Bobcats. Okay. And when that game started, the way Ohio State played that game, like you could tell, like that Grambling State game, they came out against Grambling State, like they could have just accidentally put 50 up on the board against Grambling State. I mean, that was such that matchup should have not have happened. That was a late addition to the schedule. They had to force that. There was we had Paul Keels on the show. Grambling State was a game that was added to the schedule because literally when that opened up, it was supposed to be UConn. Connecticut was supposed to play the Buckeyes in week 3 or week 2. They backed out of it. Ohio State immediately went into not panic mode, but into just trying to do everything they can to get a game that week. The only team in the entire country, the only college football program in the entire country that had last week's day open was Grambling. That's why they did that. Ohio, look, they put up some resistance against Ohio State, and, it is what it is. I don't like that, but we're seeing a lot of teams right now kind of get not pushed around, but given a little resistance against teams that shouldn't. The bottom line is if it's a bad game for Ohio State to still winning 37-9, I'll take it. I'll take it. Ohio, we knew they were going to be a competitive MAC team in regards to a team that you weren't just going to be able to bully over from the second that the ball's kicked off. Eventually, I think they had enough dudes to kind of match up with Ohio State from play to play here and there, but they don't have the depth, and we saw that. But good for Ohio. I mean, that's a team that's 1-2, 2 losses. I mean, that's a bad start from a record standpoint. But we watched this team hang in there with the Power 4 opponent in Rutgers. They beat a Power 4 opponent in West Virginia. And then, they go on and they, find themselves in a, one possession game at one point in the first half, well into the first half against Ohio State. And then they come out and they put a touchdown up on the board. I mean, it was 13-9 there for a second. Made everyone a little not nervous. I never thought that they were going to lose, but I'm like, come on, Ohio State, stop playing with your food and let's just get on with it. Whatever. I talked about this with Keith Byers and some other. The only thing you could take away, there was nothing that you could take away from that Grambling State game. At least what I liked about this Ohio game is that we could finally we're starting to be able to peel some stuff back, and we're starting to be able to get some takeaways. The one takeaway that I have the most after that game is Bo Jackson. For one, when you got a name like Bo Jackson, you have, if your last name is Jackson and you have a kid and you name him Bo and his name is Bo Jackson, you better hope like hell that he's successful in sports in some capacity, because sometimes I'm not a parent. All right. I probably won't ever be a parent, but I have to know. And luckily Kinner, there's no successful Kinners out there, so I don't have to worry about it. But if you have a name like Jackson as your last name and you name your kid Bo, you better sure as hell hope that he's a good athlete, because when you hear the name Bo Jackson, you just expect a name like Bo Jackson to be good. And Bo Jackson has been pretty damn good 2 weeks. He ran for 108 yards. He didn't play in week 1 against Texas. Ran for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns, obviously against, Grambling, and then 9 carries for 109 yards against Ohio. He's their best back. I love James Peoples. CJ Donaldson's solid, but the bottom line is there's just something different about Bo Jackson. He just looks the part. He has a different burst. He has a different level. I'm all for it. We're starting to see the stars really start to align for this Ohio State team. We knew the names, but the stars. I give Julian Sand credit. He threw the ball 32 times. He completed 25 of those 32 pass attempts. He threw for 347 yards and 3 touchdowns. I am not, however, going to sit back and pretend like those 2 interceptions didn't happen. He threw an interception against Grambling State, and he threw 2 against Ohio. I'm a little concerned about that. I think the kid could throw the football. And I think that when you have weapons like Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, who, by the way, I look at Carnell Tate and I kind of get this little vibe right now that the Buckeyes have like this Bengals type of makeup to this offense where you don't just have a wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2. I think it's a 1A, 1B. Jamar Chase is clearly better than T. Higgins, but T. Higgins is so good that you still give him enough respect to call him 1A and 1B. I think we're getting there with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Carnell Tate is not as good as Jeremiah Smith, but Carnell Tate has been so good here early on that I really look at this as a 1A, 1B situation. Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate, they've been fantastic. So to see, we knew what we have with Jeremiah Smith. You knew what you expected with Ennis and Carnell Tate coming in, but which one was going to kind of peel away? It's Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate. Bo Jackson's emerging as a star in the run game. The offensive line has been pretty solid. Julian Sayin, I think, is progressing exactly how I love that after that Texas game, they kind of handled him with kids' gloves, and they've been kind of opening it up more and more. I think that what we've seen from him the last 2 weeks with the addition of the bye week, and now we get to see him go make his first start on the road against Washington. I don't think you could have asked for a better September's worth of mixture of games and kickoff times and level of opponents. And yeah, Washington's a game that Ohio State should win. But I think Julian Sayin going on the road, it was announced yesterday, it's a 3:30 kickoff. I'm excited to see what Julian Sayin does on the road. I want to see what Bo Jackson does against a bigger team now. Was Bo Jackson just bullying Grambling State in Ohio, and now he's going to, kind of go back into hiding now? I don't know. But I'm excited to see the progression of this team. It's not often where you see our team win a national championship, lose a ton of guys to the NFL, and still get to see them remain the number one team the next year while replacing so many valuable pieces. And there's not a lot of number one teams overall. There's not a lot of teams who could be number one overall and still get the luxury of developing each week. Ohio State's the number one team in the country already, and I don't even think they're close to being a finished product yet. That's what I'm most excited about when it comes to Ohio State. Adam, I hope you're well. Adam says the success of the team was always dependent on how Julian did when it came to turnovers. Yeah, and this is why I remember Kev and I last year. Kev was super high on Will Howard. I was not initially. I said, look, Will Howard, he's okay. He's doing his job. He's getting the football out. He's getting it to the guy. He's distributing the ball. There's just something about him that I just wasn't sold on. And a lot of it had to do with he turned the ball over more than I liked early on. I didn't like the clock management mistake in the loss against Oregon, even though he threw for 300+ yards. He was phenomenal, right? But all I remembered was that I was not a Will Howard guy until we got later into the season. And then it really, when I say later into the season, guys, I mean not even the season. I mean the postseason. The Will Howard that exploded in the postseason, we could say, they won that because they won the national championship because of the defense. Ohio State won a national championship because of Will Howard. The defense for Ohio State, although it did get better throughout the year, Ohio State's defense was their strength pretty much all of last year. The only thing that changed in the postseason was the elevation of the quarterback position. Will Howard all of a sudden wasn't just throwing the ball to wide open receivers. He was fitting it into tight windows and leading that team down the field. The SEC defense of Tennessee didn't stand a chance against Will Howard. Same thing with Oregon, Oregon, the defending, they were the Big Ten champions, regular season and the Big Ten championship winner in the championship game. They were undefeated, the number one team in the country. They didn't have an answer for Will Howard. Texas didn't have an answer for Will Howard. Notre Dame, the best defense in college football, didn't. So it's all about the quarterback position. So, Adam, I'm with you on that. I'm with you about the success of the team was always going to be dependent on how Julian did when it came to turnovers. Will Howard had a lot of big games last year. The turnovers never haunted them because, they were blowing a lot of teams out last year. Julian saying these interceptions don't hurt us against teams like Grambling in Ohio. I'm not nervous about Washington. I'm excited. I really want to see. I think Washington, because this is the first time that these two teams will play as Big Ten opponents. I'm kind of curious, how are we viewing Washington? Because if Washington was a non-conference opponent, this would be the Buckeyes' premier non-conference matchup, and I'd be pretty excited for it. We can't – I know Washington is not like Oregon or anything like that right now, but, guys, I don't think we could put Washington – what category, I guess, would you put Washington in the Big Ten? Are you going to put them in that Iowa category where, okay, we're going to win, but that's a good enough program to give you a little resistance and make things ugly if you're not careful? Are we going to put them there? Are we going to put them in that category with Penn State where you're going to get a good swing from them, but you still got to play really, really good to beat them? Are we going to put them there? What category are we going to put Washington in? How do we view that? Either way, for Ohio State to kick off the season, for Ohio State to face Washington on the road, then kick off their first road game of the season at Washington. I think that's a good test. Nebraska, Will Howard brings up Nebraska. I think this Nebraska, yeah, it's like one of those where I'm not worried about Nebraska, but you still got to come out. Like, we're going to see that too at some point. Like, Illinois in a few weeks. I'm excited. I was joking with Jason Fitz. I'm excited for that Illinois-Indiana game. We're going to learn a lot about that. But yesterday, the top, the AP poll after week 4 came out. There you see it. Ohio State coming in at number 1. Illinois at 9. Again, they're trending toward. I mean, that's going to be the matchup that we're going to circle here in a few weeks, assuming that Illinois takes care of business against Indiana coming up this weekend. But with Illinois at 9, Texas A&M at 10, there's Texas coming in at 8. By the way, Texas is in trouble, man. You want to talk about Ohio State, the success of them being dependent on Julian Sayin. I mean, Texas was the number 1 team in the country, a national championship contender. They may not be a playoff contender right now, and I don't care that they're number 8 in the country. I don't see, and let me see what Texas has on their schedule for one. If this is the Arch Manning that they have, if this is who Arch Manning is moving forward, not only is Texas no longer a national championship contender, I don't think that they are a playoff contender. I mean, what's Arch Manning going to do? I mean, they got Arch Manning in Texas, so they're going to be at home against Sam Houston this coming up weekend. But then they are going to be on the road at Florida on October 4th. Then they're going to be going up against Oklahoma. All right. Now, you do play Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt. Arch Manning at Georgia. Arch Manning against Texas A&M to close out the regular season, and that, Texas versus Texas A&M. Like, I'm just saying, not only do I not think that Texas is a national championship contender anymore, if this is who Arch Manning is, they are not even a playoff contender. So they come in and they're in the top 10. They're sitting at number 8 in the most recent AP poll that came out over the weekend. That's fantastic. I'm not a believer in Texas right now until I see a better Arch Manning. We were wondering with Julian Sayin, how much would he have to do to keep up with Arch Manning? He outplayed Arch Manning in week 1, and he's been the better quarterback. Who would have thought coming into after all the offseason talk and the build up to Ohio State, Texas, that the entire time Ohio State actually had the better starting quarterback, and Ohio State's starting quarterback still has a lot to improve on. That's how bad Arch Manning has been, and underwhelming. That's how bad it's been. Adam on Facebook says Texas needs to figure out how and why Arch is playing at the current level he is. Guys, like, I'm here to tell you, like, I was waving that red flag last year about him because nobody was super high on Quinn Ewers. But everyone was so high on, man, Arch Manning's going to be a one and done to the NFL. If Arch Manning was that good and you were sitting him behind Quinn Ewers, that just means he's not that good. It just means he wasn't that good. But everyone said, no, they're just being patient, this, that, and the other. You're not risking losing a national championship if the better quarterback's sitting behind the worst quarterback. Quinn Ewers, who everyone was skeptical on, was the better quarterback last year. That's why. They weren't being patient with Arch Manning. Arch Manning wasn't ready. If you guys remember, so Texas and Georgia will play down the road in a month. Now, William says, I think Arch is hurt. Now, I haven't come across any article stating that. For his sake, I hope he is. And as a Browns fan, I hope he is too. I hope that Arch Manning truly is this generational quarterback that the Browns are going to be in position to draft, because as we just heard with Jason Fitz, there is no college quarterback that's going to go save the day for some sappy NFL franchise that's desperate for a quarterback. I mean, I might as well just go buy a Deshaun jersey and just accept the fact that that's going to be the quarterback again next year. I mean, my goodness, right? So maybe, William, maybe that's the case, but we'll see what happens. I don't know if that is the scenario at hand. It would make sense, but this could be one of the biggest flops in college football history. I don't know the last time a quarterback got so much hype and fell this, hard and flat compared to expectations. I don't know, but Ohio State's at 1, Penn State's 2, LSU coming in at 3, and then there you have it with Miami coming in at 4, Georgia at 5. And then Oregon, we talked about this with Jason Fitz. Oregon, they're just quiet. Everyone's watching Georgia after beating Tennessee. LSU got a big win over Clemson in week 1. Ohio State moved to number 1 because they beat Texas. Penn State's been hovering at 2 or 3, depending on whether it was the coaches poll or AP poll. Everyone's making noise. Florida State's roaring up the rankings because of the fact that they, of course, beat Alabama in week 1. And by the way, Alabama, I don't think is bad. I think Alabama's actually pretty damn good. That should tell you just how good this Florida State team is. I know you guys don't want to hear it. I don't actually work for ESPN. And everyone's like, oh, Kidder, you work for ESPN? No, it's fake ESPN. I work for an AM radio station in Dayton. I have no ties to ESPN outside of the fact that we're an ESPN affiliate. I'm just being honest. I don't do the whole SEC shtick. I think it's the more times than not, it's the best conference in football, but I just believe that. But that's besides the point. It has nothing to do with being indoctrinated by ESPN or whatever else you guys say. I think Alabama's pretty dang good. I think they looked bad in week 1, no doubt. That's the danger of going up against a bigger program like a Florida State right off the bat, although that should have been a safe one. But nonetheless, Florida State coming in at number 7. So my point is, everyone's talking about Ohio State's win over Texas. Everyone's talking about Penn State bringing back, of course, Drew Aller and the 2 NFL running backs and the majority of the starters on both sides of the ball. LSU beats Clemson early on in the season. Miami, they've been roaring up. They have some very impressive wins to start. Georgia just beat Tennessee. Right? Texas, they're still there in the top 10. Illinois, all right, they blew out Duke. They haven't played anybody, but they're blowing out all their opponents. And then there's Texas A&M, who's looked very solid. Everyone's talking about everyone in the top 10. And then there's Oregon, who they blew out Oklahoma State or whatever. They put 70 on them 2 weeks ago. They are bludgeoning teams. And they're just quietly hiding in the weeds a little bit, sitting in the, they don't want any of the attention on them. And Oregon's going to have a chance to make some noise. And when that happens, I think, everyone's focused on Ohio State, Penn State. Luckily, Ohio State doesn't have to run into Oregon possibly till the Big Ten championship game. But, Oregon's going to be they're going to be taking on Oregon State on the 20th coming up this weekend. And then on the 27th, what a big week, by the way, Ohio State against Washington, Oregon at Penn State. Oregon at Penn State. That is a massive Big Ten game coming up. And then Oregon, after playing at Penn State, they will be at home against, for the time being, top 25 Indiana. And then Oregon will not play another big game until they play USC at home. USC somehow just cracked the top 25 with the win over Purdue. Imagine beating Purdue to get into the top 25. The AP poll is so weird. And then they'll close out the season at Washington. So, again, Oregon, keep an eye on them. I'm fascinated by that. Keith Tolliver says next week should be the first week of the polls. So many teams ranked high, and they suck right now. Yeah, I mean, Keith, Notre Dame's in the top 25. They're the first team to ever crack the top 25 with a winless record. They're 0-2 and somehow in the top 25. I'm with you, Keith. I think the preseason poll is ridiculous. I don't think that a poll should come out at all until after the first month of the season. Everyone, we criticize the college football playoff, but to their credit, the college football playoff, as much heat as they get, to their credit, they at least wait until mid-October before they release that. Or, I'm sorry, not even October, November. Penn State will play at Ohio State on November 1st. And then I think it's that Tuesday. I know it's that week, and I believe it's that Tuesday that they put out the very first college football playoff rankings. That's how you do it. At the very least, the AP should wait a month. Because we're already 3 weeks in, and we already know. We have a good idea of who the good teams are and the bad teams are. You still need another couple weeks. But the fact that rankings have been out at all is just stupid at the end of the day. But nonetheless. All right. Justin Kenner with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio, 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. We'll step away for a few moments. Week 4 of the high school football season wrapped up over the weekend. We'll give you our top 5 individual performances. Great performances all weekend long, and we'll have our top 5 for you when we come back. It's the Justin Kinder Show presented by Frickers. The list, let's see. The list includes, right there, we'll just give you a quick gander. Troy, the Troy Trojans quarterback and Aiden Kirkpatrick. Shout out to him. Dalen Switzer, the quarterback for Fairborn. I mean, Wayne has a couple players on this list. We'll highlight it all when we come back. It's the Justin Kinder Show presented by Frickers. Fairmont Firebirds will welcome in the Wayne Warriors coming up this Friday night. It'll be our week 5 somehow. We're already at the halfway point of the regular season in high school football, but our gridiron game of the week Friday night will feature Fairmont as they welcome in the Wayne Warriors. Fairmont gets their first win of the season this past Friday as they defeat Centerville's 20-17. And Wayne, they get a big win to improve to 2-2 overall, 1-0 in GWAC play as they were able to knock off Springboro this past Friday. They won 48-23. 48-23, the final there. Look, the week before, so week 3 for the Greater Western Ohio Conference there, every team in that conference lost. But a lot of these teams, to their credit, they're playing some of the top teams in the state. They're not just, going out and scheduling teams who, normally aren't very good. Like, that's why I think a lot of the records for GWAC teams as we're starting out. I mean, the Beaver Creek is 2-2 overall and 1-0, as well as Wayne 2-2 overall and 1-0 sitting at the top. Those are the top 2 teams in the GWAC. Shout out to Beaver Creek, by the way. This is, I feel very happy for them. That is a school that traditionally does not win a lot of football games. And I'm never, this is why I always get worried about talking about high school sports, because I'm so aggressive when talking about my Browns and Bengals and Buckeyes, and that's a much different thing. Like, those are professional athletes. These are high schoolers, so I never like to talk bad about them. But Beaver Creek, and you talk to anyone there, they'll tell you they have not traditionally been a good football program. And for that, we've seen the strides that they have made over the last couple of years. So to be sitting here at basically almost the halfway point of the season and they're sitting atop, that's pretty exciting. But a lot of these schools, Wayne included, when you look at their non-conference, they played Fairfield and they got a win, but they played at Pick Central over in Columbus. They played St. Ed's. I mean, so these records, I don't think you're getting a true view for just who these teams are, because a lot of these teams play really good teams. Fairmont plays Alter and Trotwood. Trotwood's really good this year. Fairmont, they're 1-3, but look, all 3 of their losses were by 1 point or 1 possession. They lost to Alter on the Scoop and Sawyer play in week 1 that they had a lead in with 40 seconds. Fairmont was winning over Alter with 40 seconds to go, and they lose that game. All right, they lose 22-21 in week 2 against Trotwood, and then they lose at LaSalle in week 3, 24-23. But you're 0-3, and it just sounds like you're a horrible team. And if you look at these games, you watch these games, no, Fairmont, not that you hang banners for this, but they were one of the best 0-3 teams in the state. So good for them. They countered and got a big win over Centerville in week 4, 20-17, the final in that one. How about Centerville, though? Centerville's 0-4, Northmont's 0-4, Miamisburg is 1-3. So again, Springboro's 2-2, but they're 0-1 in GWAC play, and then Springfield got off the mat. That's another one that's been playing a tough non-conference. They played at Wenton Woods. Walsh Jesuit, they lost to them in week 2. They lost to Trotwood 16-13 in week 3, but they got off the mat with a 37-0 shutout win against Miamisburg. So yeah, we call a lot of the GWAC games. That's why we spend a lot of time talking about them more than others. But as far as some of the other conferences, Southwestern Buckeye League, shout out to Brookville, 4-0 right now, along with Oakwood. Oakwood, I really like their quarterback. Big fan of what Oakwood has going on over there. We're going to highlight some of these top individual performances. A lot of really good players out of this conference as well. Valley View 3-1. They're 1-0 in SWBL play. 1-3, Middletown, Madison. Carlisle's 3-1 overall. Eaton and Waynesville both 1-3. Bellbrook 2-2, sitting atop the Southwestern Division right there. Ross 2-2, Edgewood and Monroe both 1-3, and Franklin still looking for their first win of the season. As far as the Miami Valley League is concerned, I saw Ron Howard. Ron Howard's tuned in right now. He was talking about Tip a little bit ago. Ron Howard said Tip is the real deal. They're complete. They are a complete team. Big fan of what they're doing right now. Tip is 4-0. They're 3-0 in MVL play right now. They're the only undefeated team as far as that's concerned in the Miami Valley League. Troy's 3-1. They are 3-0, however, in MVL play. Butler's 3-1, Greenville 2-2, and Piqua is 1-3. Fairborn, very excited for them. They're off to a very good start. That's another team that traditionally has not been a very good football school in recent years, obviously, but they're 3-1, 2-1 in MVL play, and they're sitting comfortably there at the top along with Xenia, both 3-1. Stebbins 2-2, Sydney and West Carrollton still looking for their first wins of the season as we head into the halfway point. As far as that goes, Baden 4-0, Alter 2-2 out of the GCL. Fenwick and McNicholas all 2-2. CJ who has been a very good school in recent years, just 0-4. They're still looking for their first win, nonetheless. All right. As far as highlighting some of the top individual performances is concerned, it's one of our favorite features that we do on the show every Monday, usually Monday, but with the Burrow news, it kind of trumped everything yesterday. But we like to highlight the top 5 individual performances from that week's week of high school football action. We'll start at number 5. I talked about Fairborn, who's off to a 3-1 start. Very good for the Skyhawks. Their quarterback had a great game this past Friday, in their win over Greenville. Dalen Switzer, shout out to him. He completed 8 of his 14 passes for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 1 touchdown pass through the first 3 games before erupting for 3 touchdowns against Greenville. Shout out to Fairborn Skyhawks quarterback Dalen Switzer for a great performance to help lead Fairborn to their 3rd win of the season. The Troy Trojans, their quarterback Aiden Kirkpatrick, he had 282 total yards on the night. He was 12 of 14 for 129 yards passing through the air, plus 143 yards rushing on the ground with 2 more touchdowns right there. Kirkpatrick completed this is what stood out to me with Troy Trojans quarterback. He completed 12 of 14 passes. Guys, 12 of his 14 passes that he completed were to 10 different wide receivers. I thought that was pretty cool. You're not locked in on one guy. You're spreading it around. You're getting everybody involved. I think that was a pretty cool stat line right there. Kirkpatrick, again, completing a pass to 10 different Trojan receivers, 10 of his 12 completions to 10 different receivers. So that was pretty cool. Shout out to Troy. They defeat Piqua 28-7 this past Friday night. Wayne Warriors, their quarterback, big fan of his, by the way, Kai Graham. He threw the ball 27 times, completing 17 of those for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns. Wayne gets off the mat. They get a big win in GWAC play. In their GWAC opener, they defeat Springboro 48-23. I'll skip up to number 1 quickly because I want to stay with Wayne. We highlight so many offensive players. A lot of the performances that we highlight always coming on the offensive side of the ball, that when I do come across an individual that's had a big defensive night, I love to highlight that. And as great as the quarterback was for Wayne and Kai Graham, I was equally as impressed with their defensive back and Sean Heisel. Guys, he had 2 interceptions and a pick 6, all right? Or one of those 2 interceptions was a pick 6. Wayne defeated Springboro 48-23, and Sean Heisel has 3 career interceptions, 2 of those, of course, coming in that one night, but it was a career night because he had 2 interceptions and his very first career pick 6. Shout out to Sean Heisel, who was all over the place on Friday night, and he helped, of course, spearhead that win over Springboro this past Friday. And then I want to give another shout out to the quarterback for the Beaver Creek Beavers. I talked about their 3-1 start. They're sitting right there at the top with Wayne atop the GWAC right now. Wayne and Beaver Creek but Wayne and Beaver Creek are both 2-2, but they're both 1-0 sitting atop the GWAC. So I want to give a shout out to Beaver Creek. But their quarterback in Calvin Svoboda, he had 12 carries for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, Beaver Creek didn't just beat Northmont. They shut out Northmont 34-0. And it's all because of their quarterback, who did not have to drop back to pass. That's what was weird about that stat line. We're talking about a quarterback, but it was what he did on the ground that carried the Beavers to a win over Northmont. Svoboda, again, 12 carries, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns. And those are our Week 4 high school football top performers from our Gridiron games of the week throughout, each week's slate of high school football games. One more time, coming in at number 5, Fairborn Skyhawks quarterback Dylan Switzer, 8 of 14 through the air for 144 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had 1 passing touchdown heading into their Week 4 matchup against Greenville. 3 of his 4 touchdowns on the season coming in one night. A huge performance for Dylan Switzer. Shout out to him. Coming in at number 4, Troy Trojans quarterback Aiden Kirkpatrick, 282 total yards on the night. Through the air, he completed 12 of 14 passes for 129 yards. And then, of course, he was able to complement his attempts through the air with some plays on the ground, 143 yards rushing with 2 touchdowns. And the most unique stat line to me was the fact that of his 12 completed passes, he completed 12 passes to 10 different wide receivers, spreading the rock, getting everybody involved. Shout out to Aiden Kirkpatrick, quarterback for Troy. Wayne Warriors quarterback was impressive as well. 17-27 for 318 yards and 3 touchdowns in Wayne's defeat over Springboro 48-23. Beaver Creek Beavers, their quarterback comes in at number 2, and Calvin Svoboda, 12 carries. Okay, he ran the ball 12 times for 134 yards and 3 touchdowns on the ground. That's all Beaver Creek needed. They win 34-0 over Northmont. And coming in at number 1, we rarely highlight a defensive player, but that's how big of a night this individual had. Wayne Warriors defensive back Sean Heisel. He had 2 interceptions on the night, including a pick 6. It was his first career pick 6. In fact, he only had 1 interception coming in to that game in his career, and he had 2 of his 3 career interceptions in that same night. Huge performance from Sean Heisel. Shout out to him, and shout out to the Wayne Warriors on a big win over Springboro. All right, good stuff. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show. We'll be right back.
Right here on 1410